Welcome to Untethered to Rooted, a podcast that brings you a collection of stories around grief, healing, and identity. Hear from everyday people how grief and loss shape their identity and how their identity shapes the way they heal and process grief. I'm your host, Daugherty, a licensed psychotherapist with extensive experience dealing with grief, both personally and professionally. And if you want to hear stories with gems and practical tools for healing, stay tuned for more. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Untethered to Rooted. Today, we'll be exploring how loss and grief opens up deep exploration of yourself and your family dynamics. And for our guest, he found that grief was a way to learn about his family dynamics and history and to reclaim his culture. We've spoken several times on this podcast about how loss affects everybody differently, but what about within your whole family system? You know, oftentimes people are surprised. I was surprised when my family members had a different grief reaction than I had to the same loss that we had of losing my mother. And some of those grief reactions can bring up conflict, but they also can bring up connection or reconnection with new aspects of ourselves or our family dynamics or other people. The interesting thing is that I've only seen this particular topic brought up 2 times online, which is kind of wild. It is a really common experience that I see with people around me, and it's also something that I also see in the therapy room, so I'm surprised I haven't seen it discussed more, but I'm really excited for us to speak about it today. For our guest, Jean Carlo, the loss of his father brought up different grief reactions in his family. It opened up realities that were just always there, especially around masculinity or machismo, handling grief, and other identities and roles in the family and in the community that maybe weren't as apparent before this major loss. And so expressions of grief varied for him and his family, and addressing mental health and grief became even more important after this loss. And one thing that also came up that was really important was just culturally, mental health wasn't discussed as well. And so this is something that we'll talk about. Jean Carlo and I will discuss further the importance of his Latino identity and how he is in a rediscovery and reconnecting season of his Latino identity, specifically as a second-generation Guatemalan immigrant. So by way of introduction, Jean Carlo Martinez is a second-generation Guatemalan immigrant, the youngest of 5 brothers, and a son of Queens, New York. Theopoet shaped by faith, migration, and memory, he writes about belonging and the sacred stories carried in city streets and family histories. Rooted in contemplative and monastic rhythms, he seeks a life ordered by prayer, presence, and justice. He works in immigration law with undocumented children, advocating for dignity and protection at the fragile intersections of policy and hope. And he is also the proud owner of a dog named Franklin, who might appear at some point in this episode. Yeah, so welcome, Jean. I'm really glad that you're here.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
You know, for all my guests, I usually have people just kind of positionality-wise locate themselves socially. And so I'm just wondering, what are some identities? I shared some of them in your bio, but I'm just also wondering, what are some of your identities that are important to you?
Yeah, I feel like this is a fun question to answer because it makes me hyper aware of all of the different things that define me, right? Things that are important. I think a lot of the stuff you kind of already covered. You know, I identify as a Latino Guatemalan. I'm second generation. I identify as a Christian. What else? I guess I struggle to identify, but still very important as a poet. I feel nervous to, claim that out loud, but I would say that. And then as a seminary student, kind of adding a little bit in front of a poet, so the Theo poet, which is always fun to try and explain. So I would say those. There's probably others that can come to mind. Native New Yorker, that's a fun one too, because there's not a lot of us left out here in New York City, which is really funny.
Funny or sad? I don't know. I'm like,
we laugh so we don't cry.
Yeah. True New Yorker response. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say those.
That's really good. Thanks for sharing that about yourself. And I'm wondering, just with your connection with this topic, obviously was introducing about just grief and grief as a way that you learned about Guatemalan culture and your family. Where do you want to begin? I'd love for you to just share what's your connection to this topic today. How is grief even relevant for you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we can start with my dad, because I think it kind of all comes from that, obviously. And I think I was able to kind of recognize the blessing I had in kind of surrounding myself with different kind of perspectives, different kind of people, so that I was able to confront the grief that was coming in a healthy way, I guess. Different, I would say, than how I was introduced to how to handle things like grief growing up, thinking about like my family and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah. Can you tell me about what happened with your dad? I know you mentioned that you lost your dad. When was that? Yeah.
Yeah. So I lost my dad to cancer in 2023. But it was something that it opened my eyes to a lot of stuff. But it's funny. I don't know if I'm laughing about it now, but it seems silly that the way that we found out that he had the cancer that he did. We were looking after one of my brother's pets. He had a bulldog, and my dad liked to pick him up, which was a bad idea because he was in the 70s. So he picked up the dog, and then he hurt his back, and then he went to the doctor, and the doctors are like, "Surprise, you have terminal cancer." So
Wow.
we were kind of shocked. I think it kind of also speaks to like our Latino culture, because we were kind of like, okay, and we just kind of like didn't take it seriously like we should have probably, until everything was kind of in our face and we couldn't ignore it. So, but we were fortunate because even when they found it, they told us we had maybe like 6 or 7 months, but he ended up living, I think, 5 or 6 years past us finding out. So, yeah, we were very fortunate.
Wow. Ooh, I appreciate you sharing about your dad and, yeah, the loss of your parent is just, it's so hard. It's so so I really feel that with you. And, what a shock just by happenstance that to find out that, just through an injury that there's more there. And I'm really glad that you had more time. I'm really glad that you had more time than what they were mentioning that you would have. But yeah, I'm sure that was a really big shock. Can you tell me, I'd love to hear more about your relationship with your dad as well. I'd love to hear about your dad. Yeah.
Yeah. I am not ashamed to say that I was my dad's favorite, and I will stand 10 toes on that. Even if my other brothers will try to say otherwise, I was definitely his favorite. I was close to my dad. I definitely lovingly say that he was my biggest cheerleader. He's my best friend. I was very close to him. Even when I was little, a lot of the pictures that I have are of me kind of following him around. I would call him amigo instead of dad, growing up. Just, cute, I guess. But yeah, we were super close. I feel like
that's cute as a teenager.
Yeah, it's fun. I have a lot of great memories with him. I feel like a lot of where I am today is because of his example. I would say that at least, the relationship and the connection that I had outside of, the whenever I was misbehaving with the firm parenting. But outside of that, he was very loving, very kind. I saw different sides of his expression of kind of emotions and stuff like that, which was really great. I think too, he was very, very dedicated to kind of making sure that I fulfilled the dreams that I had. I remember wanting to go to college, and us, me and my parents, we had no idea what that even meant. And I didn't really have a good guidance counselor in high school, so shout out to Berwick, PA for that. I don't think that the guidance counselor is there anymore, so it's okay to say that. But yeah, she didn't really help me out much, so I didn't really know what college looked like. Parents didn't really know what college looked like. So we did the best we could, and I remember I was still short some money to be able to go to college to start the semester. So my dad, without thinking, he went to the bank, he got a loan, he gave me the check, and then I was on my way. And we drove to the campus, and I started my first semester in college.
That's incredible to me. That's just such to me, I hear that's just the love that your dad had for you, and just really believing in you and believing in your ability to do well in college and wanting you to have that opportunity. I bet that was a surprise for you.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of the sacrifices. I mean, both my parents, but specifically talking about my dad, I didn't recognize how great of a sacrifice it was until now that I'm older, which I think is not unique to me, but still makes the different things that I remember very special for sure.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned that just health and Latino culture. I'd love to hear just how did Latino culture kind of influence sort of even thinking about your relationship with your dad, thinking about his health, thinking about mental health. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like unfortunately, I mean, I'll speak specifically just for myself, right? The way that we were raised, I feel like it was always like, you got sick, just stay in bed, sleep it off, or like, oh, just drink a tea, you'll be okay, or like it was always our fault. Like you did something, you went outside and like with your wet hair or something. So it was always like things that they heard from passing down, which weren't often backed with scientific anything. So going to the doctor for checkups. Like I didn't really do yearly checkups, which is wild to me. Like now that I'm thinking about it, and I went just because you had to have certain vaccines to go to school. So that's when I would go to the doctor to get these things. Even for the dentist, like it was just whenever something bad happened. So again, kind of talking about what I mentioned in the beginning when we heard about our dad, it was just we didn't worry about it until it was right in our face and we didn't have a choice. And I think it was a lot like with health, with mental health, with all of those different things. That's just how it was. And if it was really bad and it could be ignored, it would be ignored. So we wouldn't really talk about it.
Okay.
It wasn't like, we just stayed away from discussing it or acknowledging it.
Yeah, so just this culture of like we don't talk about things that are maybe bad or scary. Is that sort of
Yeah,
in your
100%.
family culture?
Yeah, 100%. And I feel like it seemed like it got worse depending on who you spoke. Like if I spoke to my brothers about it, it was less like because I also we were all boys, so it was like
Whole house of boys. Okay.
yeah. So in some ways, when we spoke about things that were rough, it was like, yeah, it's happening, just get over it. But and then with our parents, it'd be like, sometimes it'd be like, oh, it's fine, we'll pray about it. And then with like my grandmas, it'd be like, no, you don't know what you're talking about. It's not real. So I think the delusion, if we have to give a word to it, it kind of got more thick with the older you went up to speak about it. If that makes
Got it.
sense.
Yeah, well, I just want to clarify. So, like, things were like mental health or things that were hard were things that were like, well, that's not a real thing that we like deal with. Is that what you're saying? So then, similarly, in health, under the umbrella of like health, then when cancer came up, was that more real for your family, or was that like we're gonna be okay? Was that different?
Oh
Because,
man.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, well, mental health wasn't even like that language didn't even exist. Like
yeah,
and it's still a language that's being learned. So
100%.
that didn't exist in our household. If I were to bring it up to my grandma, even like the idea of a therapist, I think she would laugh at me, and then she'd probably like try and swing at me like, "What are you talking about, therapist?" But with the cancer specifically, I feel like, and it's hard to admit for sure, but I think all of us were kind of just like pretending, like even myself, like we were kind of like, he doesn't seem sick. He's going to the appointments. He's fine. Like it's okay.
Yeah.
So we didn't really acknowledge it, and that's I think that's this right now. Even saying it to you, I think this is the first time that I'm acknowledging that I wasn't acknowledging it. So yeah, it was hard. Yeah, it's still hard. I think.
Yeah, yeah. And I think I think you're really hitting on something that like sometimes we don't believe something until we actually like see it, like with our own eyes, see it, and seeing the changes happen, and then we're like, oh, this thing is real. Even with mental health, right? Like it's sort of like I think it's like an invisible thing sometimes until we actually like see someone's behavior change, and then we're like, okay, you're not yourself, but then we ascribe something else to it.
Yeah.
How did you even learn about mental health more? How did you even was like because it wasn't happening necessarily in your family, so I'm wondering like how did you even come to talk about it more? Was it I don't know, a church? Like sounds like spirituality, church might have been a big thing too, but maybe not. So I don't know. Like how did you talk
Yeah.
about mental health more?
Well, I appreciate everything that my upbringing in the church gave me, and I will not try and diminish that. But I think too, growing up with like heaviness and like things that were hard, it was always like we'll pray it away and it's fine. So I don't know that speaking about mental health came from that really growing up. I think maybe more so now where I'm at in the kind of the denomination of church. I'm maybe more now, but I think for me it started just because although I had my group of guys that I grew up with, I always found myself kind of having like a group of friends that were female. I think I got that introduction to like, let's talk about your emotions, or like recognizing like a lot of things, like how I spoke to people, how I was coming into a space, all those things that I was carrying. I think all of that came from being having that friend group. I think it started there. That like the seeds of emotional intelligence were birthed in there.
Ah, girls, let's go with like coming and just like,
Yeah.
introducing some like, hey, we're gonna talk about our emotions, we're gonna talk about our feelings. There were other women in your life, obviously your mom and your grandmother that you mentioned. Did you feel like some of the things that your friendships with the girls that you grew up with that were friends, like I was wondering, did they open up more around emotions than maybe your mom or your grandmother did, or did you feel like you could relate to like your grandmother and mom more after having more friends that were girls? And then I'm curious about that too.
It's so what's funny is that in because we already said that it was a lot of guys in my house. So
Yeah.
the male presence was more pronounced. My mom worked a lot. So we would see her like in the evening for a little bit. She would cook dinner and then she was exhausted. So the food was there, we would get it when we would want to, but she would be like relaxing and unwinding because she had to do it again the next day. And then with my grandmas, they were around for sure, and they were affectionate too, but we didn't live with them, so if we wanted to see them we had to go to them. So I think maybe it's funny that I'm recognizing a lot of things now as we're talking, but I think a lot of these friendships were birthed from maybe that want for that warmth, that sort of like tenderness, the care that is traditionally kind of associated with like a mother figure type of thing. So I think it came from that maybe. And I think too, I will say that my beginning of acting, where like I was okay with crying, or like I was good with crying on demand, came from learning that it was okay to express these emotions from these friends. Where at home it wasn't a thing. Like if I cried at home, it was like immediately like, stop, you shouldn't be crying. You're a guy, don't do that. So I think it was that outlet to kind of be able to, you know, express that side of the emotions that I wasn't able to.
That's really beautiful, actually, that like your friendship with these girls, it aided you in being able to just be able to release and express your feelings more. And you also had the desire to want to express your feelings more when maybe it was shut down a little bit more at home.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
And
it's
because of
great.
masculinity, because of like, which, well, I mean, like, let's go get into it. I'm like curious just about the masculinity piece of things and how that, masculinity and also machismo specifically, like, and being a Latino, like, what was that machismo or masculinity influence like in expressing your feelings?
Yeah, I, I mean, it was hard, honestly, because I was getting it from, and I will also acknowledge that it's in some ways they were doing it because they cared, right? They were trying to look out for me in the way that they were brought up. So, I was brought up this way, and they showed that they care for me by teaching me these things. So I think it was kind of like that same, we're trying to care for you by teaching you. I in
So be
the
strong,
Yeah, so like
not
being
show.
strong, preparing myself to be like the head of a household, to be like a protector, being assertive and firm and like stoic and all of these different things that are associated with that. I think those things were coming up, but I feel like I don't know. Maybe growing up I was rejecting it for some reason, because I would say that if I were to put myself beside what like the definition of like a a strong Latino man should be traditionally, right? I feel like I wouldn't check off a lot of the boxes. I'm all right with that though. Like I'm okay with that. Like even thinking about like writing poetry, though you don't do that. And then like even some of the songs that I listen to, like you don't do that either. By now I should have been married. I should have a few kids. I don't have any of that. So like I feel like, yeah, it's. I think a lot of me was rejecting that idea, and maybe it's too because of what I saw, like how it came up in church, how it came up at home. Like I just was not interested. And it's, I think in part too because I wasn't able to express like myself with like feeling sad or like feeling lonely maybe as a kid, you know, because both my parents worked a lot, so kind of had to occupy myself. So all of these different things I think maybe helped me to push back against these stereotypes.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, even just I'm making the connection now that like even your parents working a lot too means that like the role models for expression probably my guess came maybe a lot from your brothers who might have been around a lot more, and so they're teaching you whatever they were taught,
Right.
as well, but then breaking from that maybe came from these other friendships or outside of your home as well. And also something like I also want to give credit to something you said of just like also internally you were wanting that. You're like, wait, I actually want to connect with my emotions. I want to connect with writing and poetry and writing that too. Like that was like deep seated within you as well. I'm curious where you feel like you got that from. Just your, yeah, that desire to want to express yourself in all these different ways.
Yeah, I feel like I live right now in Jamaica, Queens, and that's the neighborhood. It's still the neighborhood where my brothers were mostly raised. I was here until I was like maybe 10 or 11, and then we moved to a different neighborhood. But it was pretty rough over here. It's unfortunately getting a little gentrified. It's safer now, which is a good thing. But then that also means that a lot of kind of like the rougher edges that kind of made this neighborhood what it is are disappearing too. So I think there wasn't a lot of space to be a little softer, I guess. So I think that's where my brothers were kind of pushing into me, like, you got to be tough, you got to be this. But my dad was also like an artist. Like he was a great artist. Like he
Wow.
drew. He would also write. I would see like how romantic he was with my mom sometimes too. Like it's silly now, but he would come home sometimes with these like mix CDs that would have like "To My Love, Sandra," and it would have these like songs. So I
I
would see
love
that from my
it.
dad. Yeah. So I think I liked that as a kid, and then it came up for me in as writing. Even in elementary school, I remember writing these like short stories that I would eventually read to the class. And I think in part it too, it comes that I had a big imagination, and maybe that stems from having to, entertain myself as a kid, because my brothers too were kind of doing their thing and they had their friends. So I was the youngest. I was kind of home. So I think it came from that need to express myself and finding an outlet for the big imagination that I had. So it's in some ways, and this is corny. I'm fully acknowledging that it's corny, but like the writing became like a friend to me that I needed in those moments where I was kind of like by myself. I needed to, do something.
Yeah, not corny at all. I'm like, I was like, oh, it's so beautiful. That writing became both a release and an expression, but also the friend that you needed to be able to feel like it was okay to express yourself. And
Yeah.
I love hearing about how your dad was an artist and how, and honestly, even though you had some of these it was both. Even though you had these messages about masculinity, you also had these messages about, but it's okay to be romantic. It's okay to express yourself. It's okay to write about things. And maybe those were the pieces that you were connecting with even more so.
Yeah. And it's really cool to think back about it. I think I've gained a lot of. I say to folks when I speak about my brothers and my dad that I've gotten the best pieces of all of them because I'm the youngest one. So I got the best pieces of all of them. So I'm kind of like an amalgamation of all of the things that I saw them do growing up, the things that they taught me, which is great.
Yeah, yeah. Obviously, the loss of your dad was pivotal for you, and I know like after loss, there's this reaction to loss, which we call grief, right? It's just like, and so I'm wondering, what did your grief look like right after losing your dad? What did it look like for you specifically?
Yeah, so again, I kind of feel grateful that I had the opportunity to go to school. I bother my therapist friends and I tell them that I have an undergrad in psychology, so I'm basically a therapist too. I'm not a therapist at all, but
I love
I
it.
bother them because they get irked about it. It's like, yeah, I took these psych classes too. I can do that. But I feel like I remember specifically a class that we had to do. It was like an introduction to like a counseling class where we had to go sit with the therapist. They talk about it with so I had that experience there, which I thought was like interesting because therapy or like a therapist, like that world, I had never heard about it, I had never thought about it, and so I went to school. I think that helped me once I recognized some heaviness that I was carrying, because there were times while my dad was doing the chemos and the just all the treatments where he would call me. It'd be like 2 3 in the morning and he would call and he would say things like, my body hurts, and he'd be just crying, in pain, and I don't want to keep on going, like I want this to be over. And as his kid, it's hard to hear those things, it's hard to hold them, and I feel fortunate that he trusted me to call me and do those things with me. But at the same time, I kind of recognize, like, okay, if I continue to hold all this stuff, then I won't be able to function like in anything else, because I
Yeah.
saw it coming up. I was becoming more irritable with friends that were asking me like, what's wrong, and I'd be like, nothing's wrong. Why are you asking me that? Like, what's wrong with you? Like, I was just getting very irritable, so I noticed something was off. And because one of the good things about working in a nonprofit, they're all about take care of yourself, self-care, all these boundaries, everything else. And they're like, we have therapy like as part of your benefits. And I was like, let me look into this. So I started grief counseling, I think a
Yeah.
year and a half before my dad got super sick and eventually passed away. And in the grief counseling, we were kind of unpacking all this stuff that I was feeling. And the grief I recognized was coming up for me, instead of like these profound feelings of sadness and like crying out and like, physically crying. It was coming up as becoming hyper productive and like super busy. So I was just like piling everything on my plate. And I didn't recognize it. And I think a part of that too comes from being out here in New York City. Like, you're always on the go at 100. So I think
Yeah.
that kind of hid it from
I know
me.
that.
So I didn't recognize it because of that. Because I was like, I gotta be productive. And yeah, that overproductivity was my form of like, this is what grief is looking like for me. Um,
Wow.
so I had to kind of step back, and I spoke about it with the therapist that I had at the time. And he nicely but firmly told me that I need to address this hard thing that's happening, or else, when the time comes, I'm gonna be disappointed that I didn't, do the things that I needed to, like have the difficult conversations that I was eventually able to have with my dad, because I recognize, like, I'm sad and it's okay. And I can cry about it, and that's fine. And I can still be productive, but that doesn't mean that I have to burn myself out, so that I don't feel.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. And so since you were doing that kind of a year and a half before your dad passed, you said you had conversations with him? Were you able to like address them
Yeah.
in a specific way? Were you able to address your emotions? Yeah.
Yeah, so it was hard, because my dad would have those moments of like, I'm not gonna be around to see you have kids, like I'm not gonna be around to see you get married. And he'd say that like very nicely, and like with like a,
Yeah.
it sounded very bright and whatever, but inside I was like, that hurts, like that's hard. So I remember I had gone to a friend's wedding back in Pennsylvania where my parents were living at the time. And I think too, I I'm not gonna lie, it was an open bar. I took advantage, I'm there, and I felt comfortable in that moment when my dad picked me up, and I kind of released everything. Like, I started crying. I was like, listen, I'm happy that you're sharing with me. I just want you to know that it hurts to hear these things, and I feel like I wasn't ready to shift the roles from like you being the caretaker to me being the caretaker. Because like, even in like the roles that we grew up learning about, like the man was always the man of the house. Don't show emotions. Just carry on. Do what you got to do. Provide for everyone. So I was like, I, it shouldn't be me. I'm the baby. Like, like what's happening here? Like, what's going on? So I kind of shared that with him, and we had a moment. We both cried, which was crazy to cry with my dad was insane. And
Yeah. What was that like?
I it was a lot. It was a lot because I feel like I felt that he was a little bit embarrassed, and then I got a little bit embarrassed, but I couldn't stop crying because like liquid courage turned into now I'm just gonna cry all the things. So I was crying a lot, and then it just felt very profound and very vulnerable. Like we connected very deeply at that moment, and I don't know. It felt good. It felt like too morbid as it'll come off. Like I felt like that was accepting the inevitable, and we were kind of like closing the door. Then like I know it's coming, and I'm okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be fine. So it was I needed it, but it was
Yeah.
still very hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Even I'm like feeling, thank you for sharing that moment. I feel like I'm with you. I was with you in that moment in the car and just as you were describing it. And what a deeply intimate and vulnerable moment. And almost sounds like it was a gift to be able to be that vulnerable with your dad. Obviously, you had a great relationship with your dad. You were his favorite and you were like best friends and everything. But this was like, this sounded like a whole nother level that you both got to witness together in a way that just maybe sounds different than other moments, obviously, because it's memorable.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think too. It's like I don't know that we fully know how to. We didn't know how to create like this container to hold all these emotions because like I don't think he really taught me how to like appropriately. I don't know if that's the right word, but like how to handle or carry the emotions well, the heavy emotions. And I don't think my brothers did either, but then also it wasn't their job to teach me. Like they were my siblings, right? So like they're teaching me what they know. And if they don't have like we didn't have that connection where it was like we're gonna talk about all these heavy things because we were all kind of scared, I'm sure, of losing our dad. So it was difficult, and I think we were confronted there with like, all right, do you want to stick to the cultural norms of like this is what a man is supposed to be? Then this is the result. So these are the
Yeah.
consequences. We're like, all right, they're all here now.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, can you talk about that one? I'm curious about, I mean, you talked about your grief reaction that you had in this anticipatory grief and this moment that you got to share with your dad. And I'm wondering, when your dad passed, I'm curious about the grief reactions in your family. What were the different reactions that came up that you saw? Did things surprise you? Yeah.
Yeah, I think I want to say now in retrospect that I'm not surprised. I'm thinking about like the ways that I know my family, so I'm not surprised. But then in some ways in the moment I was shocked. I was just like confused at the reaction because what I understood grief to be, I don't know why I thought like we were all gonna grieve the same, and I don't know why in my head it was like we're all gonna be in this room, we're all gonna be crying together, we're gonna be holding each other. Like that's what I pictured in my head, and
That's,
I
yeah.
think that's like the result of media portraying grief, which it could be that. Maybe sometimes it is that, but it wasn't that for me. I not to be like specific with each person, but some folks turn to like blaming and anger to kind of deal with the grief. For others, I noticed that it was debilitating, the grief. It kind of like broke down all of the facades of like bravado and like courage and bravery and like all of this. And yeah, I think grief made us all human, and it brought us
Wow.
all down to the core of like this is who we are. But
Yeah.
it was really hard. I feel like because of the grief counseling on the outside, it looked like I was handling it well, and I thought I was too. But I think in being open to kind of holding space for folks to unload the burdens of what they were carrying, I think now it has come up for me as like now I'm kind of mad, which I'm still kind of starting to. I'm trying to reconcile with this anger because it feels like it doesn't belong here in this space, but I'm trying to accept it because I think it does. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think inside, and maybe that's a little bit about being Latino too, like not trying to like shake things up or like, I'm not trying to burden anybody else, but like the anger feels like an invader almost. Yeah, and I was just shocked. It was the anger that others felt. was confusing to me. I didn't get it. Because the anger kind of overtook the sadness that I think could have connected all of us. And I think we all felt some form of betrayal. And I think the betrayal mixing with the grief transformed into something different for each of us.
The betrayal and the loss of your dad, and just like how it
Yeah.
all happened, and betrayed by the sickness, or betrayed by who?
It's and that's the tough part because it's like, so the betrayal, if you ask anyone, if you were to sit down and like interview each of us, I think the answer to that would be different for each of us. I think
Yeah.
now I think it's a betrayal of like, I feel slightly betrayed by my dad for not answering some of the things that are now questions that I have, feeling blindsided about some of the things and kind of at a loss and confused. But I think in that moment, it was like, in some ways, we were kind of like betraying each other. But then it's just a lack of communication that we all had because I don't think we really spent time talking about the heavy things together because we waited till the last moment to address everything. So how could we?
Yeah.
We were trying to make sure that everything was taken care of as best we could, and then everything kind of exploded in our face, and we were trying to adjust how we could. So I think, yeah, in some ways, I think we all betrayed each other, which is sad. Even saying that out loud, it hurts because I know that I hurt folks in my family by some of the decisions that I made, but also it was like I was doing the best I could. I think we all were. So now,
Yeah.
3 years in, I feel like, more grace. But in that moment, it was grace, not here. We're not doing that here.
Yeah, yeah. Grief, I so appreciate you sharing this, because I feel like grief just has this way of, because we don't talk about it a lot in our culture, because we don't talk about how do we address it, how do we share in it together, especially, like, I guess I'll speak about US culture, right? But I imagine also like Latino culture is a subset, and also just like, even I imagine also in Guatemalan culture, maybe there's something different. I'd love for you to touch on that a little bit later,
Yeah.
but I'm wondering, or it's maybe more of a comment that, like, we don't talk about this stuff, and so therefore I feel like our generation, it's also like a generational thing. I feel like millennials, Gen Z, maybe a little bit of Gen X in there, but like more so, like, I feel like this generation is like starting to talk about grief and mental health and emotions and all of that, of these things, in a more open way, that we're trying to do it in like a different way. And it can get really confusing, but also that probably clashes with
Yeah.
people of different generations, and also, like that, all of that is like a clash and conflict. And so I imagine for you, in the betrayal that you experience, that there is this like conflict, and also maybe there's connection too, but certainly like there's conflict that comes up. And I think that's the hard part that people don't talk about a lot in grief.
Yeah.
They don't talk about the anger piece, and I'm really glad that you did, because I think that anger does come up a lot. And anger, I know, like, it's also something that has come up for me in the more recent past. And yeah, I think it's hard to talk about anger and grief when people have certain expectations around what your grief might or should look like,
Yeah.
right? And I just want to say, like, anger is totally reasonable. Anger makes a lot of sense, and there's a lot in there with anger and feeling that sense of betrayal. Even anger, we talk about in mental health, is like the secondary emotion, and under it are all these primary emotions. But sometimes the thing that gets expressed, or sometimes even the thing culturally, masculinity wise, that is allowed to be expressed, is anger and bravado and all these things.
Yeah.
But really underneath is like betrayal or hurt or pain or sadness or disappointment. And all of that is just, it makes sense that everybody had this different reaction, even though you thought, and oftentimes people think, people would have the same reaction to the same event.
Yeah, it's and I think it's still evolving for each of us. I have seen the progression of the grief and kind of the I think we kind of mentioned it. We spoke initially that we don't get over it. It's just kind of, it turns into something else. So we're kind of just like living with it. One of my friends that lost her mom, she said that to me when it happened. She was like, that I'm still dealing with it. and we just learn to live with the grief. Like we hold a space for it, and then we learn to live with it. And I'm seeing it, like even in my mom, I feel like the conversations that I had with her when it first happened, there's a lot of pain that was there, and it was hard also to hear that from my mom. And just even with my grandma, like we would talk about stuff, and it's like it felt like we were just talking about the same things over and over again, and I would try to listen and respond, but nothing was changing them. And I think that a fault of mine was probably to try and change their mind, which is I shouldn't do that. It's not my job to do that. I see now though, my mom is very happy. She's very she's all about taking advantage of the life that she has, and it's beautiful to see her. It was beautiful to see her. She came out here to visit, to see my apartment for the first time in New York City. It was really great. She was lively. She was joking, just like, this is great. I'm seeing you come alive again, and it's wonderful. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, you're really talking about like how grief changes you, which I definitely want to ask you about. Yeah, I actually am wondering, how do you feel like grief has changed you? How is grief, you've talked about sort of like how your identities influence your grief. We've talked a little bit about like what has helped you cope, like grief counseling, and maybe there are other things too, but I'm curious, like how has grief changed you? Changed your identities, changed how you connect with even your family members?
Yeah, I think first I think grief has helped me to take care of myself better. I think I've begun, it's taken a long time, and it's mostly this year that it's happened. I've learned to develop healthy boundaries for myself, so I don't fall into that kind of like negative cycle of being like perpetually busy, like functionally depressed, instead of like, attacking or like dealing with what's happening. I think that's the first thing. I think too, my connection with family, with my relatives, I think has changed. I'm spending more time to try and get to know them more and more deeply. I think about my mom, like the questions that I ask her now are different than they were before. I think about my grandma now too. We have a special relationship. That's my dad's mom. So getting to go on a trip that I got to go with her in December, we spent the month in Guatemala together. It was very special. I was supposed to take the trip with my dad, so I waited all these years to go to Guatemala with my father, and I obviously couldn't. So getting to do it with my grandmother, was special. We kind of did it, and she had mentioned it out there that my dad would be very happy to see us out here doing this trip together. And I think, I feel like I want to be more connected to my family, to my roots. Just relearning a lot of things that I didn't get a chance to learn.
I think you even mentioned that like you're connecting with your brothers, like all your brothers, in a different way too, right?
Yeah. I have a brother in California that I'm glad that we were able to reconnect. So he's a half brother to my dad's side, and I hadn't really gotten a chance to speak with him much growing up. But when we found out that my dad was sick, we all reconnected, and I speak to him like weekly, and we chat. I've gotten super close with him. I think once you hit the point of sending each other like the reels on Instagram, then you get into like the level of like, oh, we're friends now. We're friends. So we're there. It's really cool.
That's really cool. And I feel like, what do you think that your dad would think about you connecting with your brother in California now, like knowing that?
So I know that he was happy about it. When I would see my dad, I would go visit them in Pennsylvania, he would mention often that he was happy that it was happening. I imagine, of course, I can't ask him, but I imagine that it was something that he wanted, all of us to kind of be united and have that connection to each other. So it's been cool because we're kind of swapping the different sides of our dad, right? Because he saw one side of our dad, we saw another side. We're kind of like comparing stories, and even with my grandma, I do that too. She kind of, when we were in Guatemala, she shared a lot of the things like, your dad, we grew up here, and he used to go here, and he liked to do these things, and hearing about her story too while we were out there, it was really profound, and I feel like I appreciate and find a deep importance now in learning the stories of my relatives, and then also connecting to my Guatemalan heritage as well, to kind of rediscover myself and my identity. Yeah. So I think grief gifted me all those things for sure.
Wow, beautiful. I mean, I really want to hear about this Guatemala trip, and I'd love for you to like just share yeah, with the listeners about the Guatemala trip, what that, that you were supposed to do with your dad, but you ended up doing with your dad's mom, your grandmother, and connecting with her more. What was that trip like? What did you learn about Guatemalan culture? Had you been there before? All those things. I want to know.
Yeah, so I had gone once with my family and I was like 4, I want to say. So like I don't remember much. I remember like a couple things, but they're like very like the memories aren't super clear. But I went the month before my dad passed and I did like FaceTime while we were out there. It was a short trip. It was like maybe 7, maybe not even 7 days, like 8 days or something like that. But this time with my grandma, it was a month. We're
Wow.
sharing a like basically we're sharing a small space together, so we were in each other's space a lot. So
Wow.
we learned to be patient with each other.
Yes.
Because she's a grandma. She's gonna be 98 this year, and she
90 with your 98-year-old grandma. I guess at the time she
yeah
was 97, but you did this trip for a
yeah.
month in Guatemala with your 97-year-old grandmother.
Yeah, I mean, it's even special just to think about it. Like she's old. I don't know how many more trips she can take like that. Low key, I feel some pride that I might be the only sibling to say that I got to do with my grandma. Some bragging rights there. But it was beautiful seeing her interact with our family out there, hearing the stories that she had to share, sharing meals with her out there. We spoke some about our dad or my dad and her son. And yeah, like I said, I think she was also feeling very, I don't know, a lot of things while we were out there. I feel like every time that I would see her looking out, because we had this little balcony, she would look out into like the outside, and I feel like she would just stare out into like the outside. And I was curious about what she was thinking about, but then I didn't want to ask her because I didn't want to get emotional, so I would just let her do her thing. But it was beautiful. I got to visit the Mayan ruins. I got to go to Atitlan, and I jumped into the water, which is something that I wanted to do before I died, which is really great. And I remember,
Wow.
looking out into the water and thinking about my dad and kind of, thinking about what it would have been like if we would have gotten to do this together. I got to present my final like project thesis for the Theopoetics program out there in Guatemala too. And my
Really?
brothers showed up to the presentation, and it was very emotional for me. Like after it ended, I remember as soon as I closed the laptop, I cried. It was just all of the things. I was in Guatemala with my grandma. My brothers showed up to the presentation. I sent out the invitation just like on a whim, and they showed up. I don't know, one of them spoke during the an encouragement. I just got really emotional.
Wow.
It was a very special trip. A lot of things, it was very healing for sure.
So beautiful. I mean, it sounds like you'll be back to Guatemala again,
Yes,
maybe. Yeah. But
definitely.
also sounds like it was such a trip that like shifted a lot of things. I don't know, being able to like share more with your brothers and this side of you that expresses the part that we were talking about in the beginning that was like, don't do that. It was like, now I get to do that. And I
Yeah,
get to do that in like, the country of like my ancestors and my like and our parents and our grandparents, and that feels, wow, it's just so beautiful to be able to do that.
yeah. I
Yeah.
think it was beautiful. And then even too thinking about it now they had mentioned that it's crazy to think about some of the conversations that I'm having with my brothers now, where I think it has switched into now we're all being expressive, and it's like wow, look at where we've come from, and look at where we are
Yeah.
now.
That's so major. I'm curious your presentation, your theopoetics, because that's part of your identity being a theopoet. What did you share as part of that presentation?
Yeah, so they're essentially like a take on the Psalms of Ascent, and they incorporate the story of a migrant going to New York, and then of the lament that a New Yorker feels in seeing what's happening to the city, how like gentrification is affecting it, how trying to support the folks that are coming in, how that affects it. So it had to do a lot with hospitality. It had to do it a lot with the journey of immigration. So I did share some things there, and I think that also kind of propelled or kind of like fueled a lot of my desire to continue to learn more about my roots, because a lot of that, the poetry, I was trying to pull more of that. So I was getting more invested in reading more history and learning more about the language is spoken out there by the indigenous people. So I shared some poetry there, and yeah, it was great. I'm glad that the Theopoetics came into my life when it did, because I think also it helped my grieving, because
Yeah.
a lot of what Theopoetics is kind of like taking what I already use, the poetry that's kind of like my form of expressing myself, and inserting God into it. So it's kind of like removing all the rigidness and all the rules and the formulas of what poetry is supposed to be, and kind of inserting the imagination that we can have when we think about Christ, when you think about the divine, and kind of like marrying it all together. And adding the grief too, because all that is in there. So I think the Theopoetics kind of, it helped me too to put language to stuff that I didn't know that I needed to have language for.
Yeah. I mean, even there's so many parallels between your grief process and probably just the lament as a New Yorker, and change and shifting, and the grief of like gentrification, but also the grief and loss of your dad, like all of those things, but also reconnection. And, you're experiencing the reconnection of your brothers, like attending this presentation while you're also reconnecting back with the land, back with like, your grandmother's like homeland. It's just like, wow, what a layered experience and trip. What a important and powerful trip.
Yeah, and I feel like that's the perfect summary. I think you gave me the perfect summary to like where I'm at with grief and with the healing. I think now it's kind of like where before it was kind of everything felt very far away and scattered. Now it's like bringing all the stuff together. So it is that I don't. That's definitely not a stage in like the grief, like because there's like isn't there like a triangle or something, like stages? I think something in psychology.
We did away with the stages long ago.
You
Honestly,
see that I can't fake to be a therapist because I didn't know.
Yeah. We've updated our models. We think about grief in a lot of different. It's not linear. It's not even in stages. Those are very specifically studied for a specific population. But we think about it just as it's cyclical. It also there's a couple different models, a dual process model. You're experiencing grief, and grief is really about how you personally are experiencing it. And a lot of times people find it comes up cyclically, obviously because we have seasons and years, right. And those things come up cyclically as well. So yeah, it comes in waves. I think people think about it as like coming up in waves as well. One thing I'm curious about is in the question about just like grief influencing your identity and even helping you to cope with like expressing yourself through theopoetics. And I'm curious, are there any kind of like rituals or traditions that you learned while you were in Guatemala, or even like some like things that you do? I think you, like in our conversation, you mentioned that you get together with your grandmother once a week for lunch, which is, I think, really cool. But yeah, I imagine there is both. You mentioned that there was like this grief in learning more about Guatemalan culture, but also there's this like beauty and opening up in learning about it and diving deep in Guatemalan poets and all of these things. I'm curious just about that. Are there things that you are grabbing from your Guatemalan roots now that you feel like you are infusing into your everyday, into your grief expressions and in coping?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the things that I notice, like I think there's a lot of reverence around remembrance and what that looks like. And of course that's here too, right? In the United States like culture as well. But like I think specifically something that I've noticed is like a collective mourning that's very, very potent in the Guatemalan culture when it comes to loss. And that's something that I want to focus in on more. There are specific rituals. Generally it's like indigenous folks that will practice them, but even still there's a reverence to remembrance that I feel like I didn't have before, that I don't focus in on. And I see my grandma too. There was a day where we went into Antigua, and she specifically wanted to go for that. At the Catholic Church they do like a remembrance, so she bought like specific flowers, she made a donation so that at a specific service they would remember my father at that service. And that's something that she does continually, and a lot of the Guatemalan population is deeply Catholic, so I feel like it's still there that remembrance. And I think the community and the remembrance is something that I want to integrate now, because I feel like just writing, I mean, it's fine too. Just, I have a book here that I was gifted. It says Letters to My Dad in Heaven. And I write in it, from time to time. And of course, this is a form of remembrance too. But I feel like more formally, there's like a communal, like something about community and having like specific rituals that's important and special. And I think the two that helps us to handle the grief that's there, and we're not ignoring it, we're recognizing it, we're facing it. It's scary for sure, but in that community, it doesn't have to be done alone. It could be done with others. And I think in a lot of ways too, it's helping to empower me to be okay. Not that I wasn't before, but even more okay with like being a part of this select club, like we had said, of folks who have felt this particular type of pain and like sadness of losing a parent, and kind of like being there for folks that are kind of, yeah, didn't subscribe to this.
Subscribe to this, yeah. I mean, I'd love to quote you from something that you said when we were talking in a prep call, but you mentioned that this is your words of like losing your dad or grief, and that grief gifted part of Guatemala back to you and connecting back in with the country and land, and that you were excited to claim Guatemalan culture and traditions. And I guess like as we're sort of like wrapping up on our time, I'm curious to just know like, what do you wish people knew about this? What do you wish you knew maybe 3 years ago that you know now? What would you tell that like early grieving part of yourself? Yeah.
I think some of the things that I would say, I feel like in part I wish I had connected to like my Guatemalan-ness faster, because what a gift it would have been to kind of like share more deeply with my dad these things, where I just had like a cursory understanding of what it was. I think it would have been beautiful to both rediscover, because my parents kind of left behind a lot of what it meant to be Guatemalan when they came to the United States. So kind of to both together at the same time rediscover that. What a gift that would have been. So I would say that, and then two, just kind of like we said, it's okay to be mad, and that it's gonna come, and to embrace it. And I think the last thing I would say, which is hard still, I feel like saying no to family, as far as like being like a shoulder or an ear. It's okay to say no, because there were times when I said yes and I wasn't okay, but I didn't want to say no to them. So I think knowing when to say no to that is pivotal to kind of handling the grief that comes.
Yeah. Key, I'm so grateful for you. I'm so grateful for your sharing. I mean, just like the beauty and the pain and the hurt and your just openness. I feel really honored to hold it with you in this space. And yeah, and I really think that and hope that our listeners really just get a lot from hearing this, but also hopefully in the future connecting with you. And I didn't want to put you on the spot with sharing any of your poetic writing, though we totally welcome it here. If people want to connect with you, I'm wondering, is that okay? And
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and what's the best way for them to connect with you?
So I have a Substack that now I have been posting to weekly. Like Thursdays, I post a poem. It's Jean Carlo 19 at Substack, or .substack.com. And then I'm also on Instagram, so it's Jeancito, and then 2_19. So welcome to connect there.
I love that. Cool. Thank you. Would you be willing to read your most recent poem from the Substack?
Oh, sure.
Not to put you totally on the spot, but just to close us out in that way.
I will say out loud that I don't remember what it was about. So okay. It might be, this one's funny. So, okay, I'll read it, and I won't explain it. It's called Can't Pretend That I'm Alright, and it's a eulogy to the music that raised us, younger millennials. So it says, electric guitar intros don't hit the same anymore. When the lyrics would strike the melodrama of our lives, singing along with Simple Plan, I'm never gonna be good enough for you. Something about the way they sang it and how it would blast from my iPod connected to my stereo by a thin white cord attached to a cassette tape, playing nothing but the sound of the rotating circles that activated. After I got my heart broken in 12th grade, my world spiraling out of control, only Amy Lee understood me. Knock, knock. Mijo, ¿estás bien? Sí. Just leave me alone. You wouldn't get it, Dad. You still have all of me. Letting the piano overcome me so my tears could use its ringing for a more steady flow of tears to soak my pillow as it cradles my head. How will I ever overcome this? My choir teacher telling me she's disappointed in me because I was too scared to sing in front of an auditorium full of spectators, of potential hecklers. Who cares what she says anyway? She needs to act her age. I care. More fuel to my fire. A soundtrack as I carefully craft a world in my mind. We're walking down these tan hallways along the royal blue lockers. Taller than me, transition to a music video highlighting all this pain I hold inside. You never loved me. These wounds, they will not heal. Walking slow motion will help. Walking to the class where I'll see you and you won't care how you made me feel. Confusing what is real. Man, you had to be there when these songs came out and they hit your soul so sonically and emotionally. Going partially and temporarily deaf from blasting them, your whole genetic makeup will shift. Before I really knew struggle or pain or love, it was as real to me then as it was to those singers. And you can't change me. What a time to be alive.
I'm grateful for you.
I'm grateful for you. Thank you so much for having me here. It's such a good time talking with you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much for sharing so much of yourself today. Appreciate you.
It was a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Untethered to Rooted. Untethered to Rooted is produced and hosted by me, Dana Daugherty. Original music was composed and performed by the ever-talented Daniel Dickinson. Thanks so much to our guests for sharing with us today. And if you like what you hear, please subscribe, rate, and review our podcast. And follow us on social at Untethered to Rooted. And if you didn't like it, what podcast? Dana who? Until next time, take and give good care.